After an exciting session from Dr. Kamakuti, let's move on to Module 3. Module 3 deals with vulnerability, threat, risk, risk assessment and mitigation, quick fixes, introduction to BCP DRP, incident management, segregation and separation of duties, and roles and responsibilities. Sun Tzu, in his book Art of War, stated, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles." What it effectively means is, you should know what threats affect your organization's security, and how it will impact your organization. And if you make appropriate provisions or appropriate security measures are implemented, then you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Now let's take a look at this slide. This is a very clear definition of what a vulnerability, threat, risk and asset is. Now if you see the image, you see that the person is the asset, as in an organization. Imbalance, he is walking on a tightrope. So imbalance is a weakness, that is a vulnerability. The crocodiles in the river down below are the threat, and possibility of falling down is the risk. If you take a technical example, your computer system is the asset. Not having an antivirus software is a vulnerability. The virus attack itself is a threat, or likelihood of a virus attack is a threat, and possibility of your data being lost is the risk. Let's move on. So what is a vulnerability? Let's take a look at the definition. Vulnerability is a flaw or weakness in the system security procedures, in the design, in the implementation, in internal controls that may result in security breach or a violation of system security policy. Now this is a big definition. Let's tell it in simple plain English. It is a hole in the system. It is a weakness in the system. So what you need to understand is, vulnerability is a hole or weakness in the system. Where can the hole be? It can be in policies, in procedures, in your technical implementations, in your internal controls. Your vulnerability is simply a hole or weakness in the system. So where do vulnerabilities come from? They come from various methods. Flaws in the software. The software is not designed properly, not developed properly, does not meet the user requirement. Faulty configuration. Your servers are not configured properly, your database is not configured properly, your network is not configured properly. It can come because of weak passwords. Not following minimum guideline for having a password, say minimum 8 character is not implemented. No alphanumeric special characters are validated. There is no system of periodically force changing the password. Then human error. That's possibly the most important and most common occurrences in any organization. And inappropriately assigned permission level. Inadequately assigned permission levels. You have an organization where you need to assign the permission on a need to know, need to do basis, but you have given more permissions to certain users, by which they can cause loss or damage to the system. So that is inappropriately assigned permission levels, and system inappropriately placed in the infrastructure or environment. You take an example. You have a critical server in your organization. You have a big hall where a lot of people work there. Your employees work there. You take the server and go put it in the middle of the hall. So there is a likelihood it is not physically protected. It's not logically protected. No password policies are followed. So what basically will happen is, somebody can come, pull out the network cable, pull out the power cable. They can log on to the system. They can just power off the system. So that means system is inappropriately placed in the infrastructure or environment. And vulnerabilities, they just don't go away by themselves. So once it is there, you will have to take adequate measures or put in controls for the vulnerabilities to go away. Now what is a threat? In simple terms, threat is something which exploits the vulnerability. But the definition of a threat is it is any event, malicious or otherwise, that can have an undesirable effect on the assets. So assets can be people, process or technology, and resources associated with the computer system or network. So what are the resources associated with the computer system or network? Again, people, process, technology. A threat can be a natural disaster, fire, flood, earthquake, tsunami, system and component failures, hard disk failure, your memory failure. Organizations or individuals who both intend us harm and have the capability to accomplish their intentions, like computer hackers, criminals, or enemy armed forces, terrorists or saboteurs. You have to include internal employees also into this, because a disgruntled employee is as bad for the organization as an external hacker. So what do threats affect? Threats affect, you have heard these three terminologies over and over again in module 1. Threats affect confidentiality, integrity, availability of information and information resources. Now the opposite of confidentiality is disclosure, integrity is alteration, and availability is destruction or denial of service threat. Let's look at some of examples for threats. Employees, external parties, low awareness of security issues, growth in networking or distributed computing, growth in complexity and effectiveness of hacking tools and viruses, natural disasters. Now, employees, why are they a threat? A disgruntled employee can always be a threat to the organization because he can cause loss or damage to the system if he is not satisfied with what he is doing. You take the example, you have already gone through the example of logic bombs. So employees are a threat, right? If the person says that if my name does not appear in the payroll in the subsequent month on the 7th, then del star dot star on the system. So that's a logic bomb. External parties, your consultants, vendors, all the external people that your organization associates with are a risk or a threat. Low awareness of security issues. Why the emphasis is on low awareness? Security awareness training should be an ongoing process for any organization. It should not be a one-time affair. Every new employee and employees who are already working in the organization have to undergo the security awareness training on a routine basis, on a regular basis. Growth in networking and distributed computing. Now, the networks have grown over the last few years to a very complex level. Today, people talk about cloud, large networks, very large networks. But once upon a time, the networks used to be confined to probably a small LAN, maybe a small geographical area. Now, it's become large, so you will have to deal with multiple threats. Then growth in complexity and effectiveness of hacking tools and viruses. Again, there are so many tools that are available in the market today, which are fully automated to do a certain task. For example, you have AnyExpose, which is a vulnerability assessment tool which can do your end-to-end network assessment, including your routers, your firewalls, your servers, your desktops. So the complexity and effectiveness of these tools have also got a very important role. So that means if somebody can sit outside your network and scan your network for the vulnerabilities and find out what are the loopholes, he is doing it in a passive basis. He is not even coming into your organization. So he gathers information from outside and then decides to launch a full-scale attack. The natural disasters is self-explanatory. Fire is a problem. Flood is a problem. Earthquake is a problem. What are the threat sources? External hackers are a source. What is the motivation for an external hacker? It's a challenge. He has challenged someone that he is going to hack into XYZ network. Ego is another factor, just to prove that he can hack into the network and just playing around. And what is the threat? The threat for the organization is system hacking, social engineering, Social engineering is the art of deception, or the art of trying to con the employees into believing that you are someone and trying to gather as much information as possible about the organization. Dumpster diving means you're going through the trash cans or the garbage bins in the organizations, finding if any confidential information is available so that you can use it for launching an attack later. Then the source of threat is internal hackers. Deadline is a problem. I'm not able to finish my job on a deadline, so I need to bring down the system so that I can blame the system for not finishing my job. I can install a backdoor for that. The financial problem, it's probably the biggest motivating factor. A fraud can be perpetuated, or poor documentation. You're disassociated with whatever is happening. Terrorist activity, it can be a revenge or for political reasons, and different type of threats can come, like system attacks, social engineering we have already seen, letter bombs we have read about it, the viruses, and of course denial of service. Then poorly trained employee. Probably this will be the most important thing. Again, I am emphasizing that lack of security awareness is probably the biggest cause of security flaws or weaknesses which are found in the organizations. The employees can do unintentional errors because they don't know whether they are doing it right or not. It's not intended to commit a felony or a fraud or something. Programming errors, maybe not following secure coding practices can lead to programming errors. Again, it's not deliberate. It's because of the lack of awareness. Data entry errors can happen to anyone, but again, if they are trained properly to verify what they have entered, then the errors can be minimized. What is the threat of this? Corruption of data, malicious code introduction, that is for programming errors. You can say backdoors is an example of malicious code introduction, system bugs, and unauthorized access. Let's see a few examples of categories of threat and some example. Human errors and failures. Employee mistake is an example. Accidents are an example. For compromise to intellectual property, copyright infringement is an example. Piracy of software is an example. Then espionage or trespass, unauthorized access to or data collection is an example. So similarly, there are around 12 items listed here for categories of threat and the corresponding examples. Just to show you in a graphical form, the same threats: high user knowledge of IT system, theft, sabotage or misuse, virus attacks are a threat. Lack or lapse in physical security policy is a threat. Natural calamities and fire is a threat. Not having proper documentation is also a threat. If there is a failure in your communication line or a system, that is also a threat. So what is the relationship between vulnerabilities, threat and risk? You know that the basic thing is the vulnerability. What exploits vulnerability? The threats exploit vulnerability. The vulnerabilities expose the information assets. Vulnerability also increases risk. Threat also increases risks. So when the asset is there, there is an asset value for that. So the more the asset value, the higher the risk. Protection requirement indicate risk. If I am spending X amount of money, then it means that I am trying to protect something valuable. Protection requirements are met by controls, and control protects against threats. So that's how we'll have to read it. Now, in simple terms, you have an information asset. You have an asset value for that. Let's say it's a critical server which has your programming code inside, the software developed by your team. So you quantify the value for that and put an asset value. Then you identify what are all the vulnerabilities that will impact the information asset. Then identify the threats that will exploit the vulnerabilities and the associated risk. So once you arrive at all this, you know that I need to protect this system using these many controls, and this is going to be the cost of that. So basically you get a whole idea of what your control measures are going to be. This process is the risk assessment process. Now there is another process called a risk mitigation process. So you see the controls here. Now the controls, your quick fixes, your countermeasures, all of these will come under your risk mitigation process. A combination of risk assessment and risk mitigation will give you the risk management process. Now there is one more thing to note here. What happens if the protection requirements are more than the value of the asset? That's something to be thought of, right? You transfer the risk to an insurance. Insurance is transfer of risk, right? To a third party. That is one. You rethink about the asset. That is, you repair, you replace or retire by putting in a new technology. So these are also important factors to consider. Let's talk about what the digital threats are. We'll just take a look at viruses, spyware, Trojan horses, and other malicious software, botnets, phishing and spam, identity theft, cyber stalking, bullying, online predators, etc., etc. There are so many terminologies available here. Skimming is one which is not mentioned here. Farming is another one. So there are different kinds of digital threats that are available or that are there. The more the technology improvement, the more the threats. But let's take a look at the basic ones or the ones which have been there for a long time so that we'll get a basic understanding of what a digital threat is. Let's see some definitions. Virus is a code that copies itself into other programs. There is also an expansion for virus, which is vital information resources under siege. That's why it's called a virus. So it is basically a code that copies itself to other programs. What is a bacteria? Bacteria replicates until it fills all disks or CPU cycles. What is a payload? Payload is some harmful things that the malicious program does after it has had time to spread. Worm is something that replicates itself across the network. It's generally riding on email messages or attached documents like macroviruses. Trojan horses are instructions in an otherwise good program that cause bad things to happen. We will discuss about Trojan horse also. Logic bombs we have already discussed in module 1 and again in the preceding slides. Trapdoor, undocumented entry point returned into the code for debugging that can allow any unwanted users. It is generally left by programmers so that they need not access the front end and go to the program. So they just have a trapdoor or backdoor set, so they have direct access to the program. Then Easter egg is an extraneous code that does something cool. We'll talk about most of this in the subsequent slides. Computer viruses have the ability to replicate themselves on an increasing number of computers. They originally spread by people sharing floppy disks. So in olden days or during the advent of computers, when floppy disks were popular, they used to spread through floppy disks. Now they primarily spread over the internet. So basically a worm spreads over the internet. Other malicious programs may be installed by hand on a single machine. They may also be built into widely distributed commercial software. They are very hard to detect before the payload activates, like a Trojan horse or a trapdoor or a logic bomb.